Good afternoon. Welcome to Cohn-Resnick's webcast, Creating an Effective Forecasting, Planning, and Analysis Process. Thank you for joining. Using the panel to the right of your screen, raise your hand so we know you can see the presentation. Okay, great. Our webcast will be presented by Mario Pompeo, Partner and National Leader of Cohn-Resnick's CFO Advisory Practice. And joining Mario today are Henry Iglesias, Vice President Analysis at Tiffany & Company, and also Tom Castellano, Vice President, Finance, Investor Relations, and Treasurer at Catalent Pharma Time, often employing lots of smart people and overcoming myths like getting the right color widget that's being manufactured in China to the right customer in Boise, Idaho, may also often find themselves with no real answer to their annual budgeting. And we will discuss some of the major challenges companies face with respect to the budgeting and forecasting process and key inhibitors to making FP&A a true value proposition within the company. We will also discuss some optimum forecasting process design characteristics, some healthy forecasting behaviors, and present a phased roadmap for transforming the FP&A function within the organization. As we begin the webinar, we ask that you follow a few basic guidelines. To submit questions, please use the Questions tab in the panel on the right side of your screen. We will be in the presentation. However, please feel free to use the Questions tab to ask them as they come to mind. For those receiving CPE credit for this webinar, please be sure to answer 75% of the polling questions within this. An email including the CPE certificate will be sent to all participants who answer 75% of the polling questions. We will also be sending a copy of the presentation along with some additional information to all attendees after the. Let's get started. Enjoy the webcast.
Thank you, Amy, to the webcast. My name is Mario Pompeo, and as previously stated, I'm the partner in charge of Cohn-Resnick's CFO Advisory Practice. Joining me today is experience in the financial planning and analysis arena, Henry Iglesias and Tom Castellano. Henry, can you tell us a brief overview of your point of view on
Mario, thank you for inviting me to participate on this webcast. As mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Financial Company. Tiffany is a jewelry manufacturer and retail on a worldwide basis. I'm responsible for the development of the company's annual and long-term strategic financial plan, in addition to partnering with management and evaluating and making investment and resource allocation decisions. This topic is central to my role. Having an effective planning and forecasting process is important to ensure the company's strategic objectives are aligned with its financial expectations and that the key investments are appropriately funded.
Thanks, Henry. And Tom, can we get a little bit more about your background and some thoughts on creating an effective FP&A?
Thanks. Ascendant, which is since split into 3 separate public companies in their financial leadership and development program, which is actually where I met Mario. I did several rotations in tax audit, investor relations before landing in FP&A, and realized very quickly that's where I wanted to be. After holding FP&A roles with increasing responsibilities, I left Ascendant to join the markets experience. After the bankruptcy of Lehman, I left the industry and joined Catalent to head up their FP&A role in the company's IPO back in 2014. It was a natural extension for me to take on investor relations, and most recently I was named treasurer of the company. In 2008, there was no FP&A group, so my role was actually to build one out. My view of FP&A is that the main goal is to provide a decision-making support that is necessary to manage the business towards growth and future financial performance. As an action plan for senior management, as well as a scorecard gauging how management is performing against that plan. That's exactly what my team and I have built out at Catalent over the last 8 years.
Thanks, Tom, and thank you both for the introduction. So let's jump right in. Since I know that I'm not always the smartest guy, folks that are pretty smart. So here we have Peter Drucker, the famous consultant, author, and educator, on his thoughts about business planning. According to Peter, trying to predict the future is like trying to drive down a country road at night with no lights on while looking out the back window. And yet, despite our poor driving techniques, FP&A remains a priority for both CFOs, financial management teams in general. As we can see on this slide, in a 2012 survey done by APQC, planning, budgeting, and forecasting were identified as the top priority of CFOs. And if the date of the last survey may have you concerned, in a more recent one conducted by the APQC in December of 2014, we see yet again that planning and budgeting and forecasting rank as the top two management challenges and priorities. So Tom, why do you think budgeting and FP&A rank so high among priorities for CFOs and management in general?
So as I stated earlier, Mario, a good FP&A function is important in an organization because it can really influence important decisions. By analyzing the market and getting to the root of key business drivers, the FP&A team can really help guide senior management down the right path. They have the ability to drill down into the detail, undertake deep analysis of what's going on both within the organization and outside, and really make sure that the right corrective actions are taken when the ship starts to go adrift. A valued FP&A function, in my view, is one that has the ability to engage with and influence the full breadth of the senior management team, not just finance directors and those on the finance staff, really ensuring that everyone has the necessary information to move the company forward. Over the last 15 years of my career, I've really seen the role of accountants evolve from pure record keepers into commercial business partners who help run the company. Many organizations are now recognizing the benefits from such professionals in what they can bring to the table. And in my view, a good CFO is one that is looked at as the #2 leader in the organization and the right-hand man to the CEO, and not just someone who signs the 10K.
Thanks, Tom. Those are great points. Henry, anything to add to that?
Yeah, Mary, I definitely agree with what Tom said and would add the following. That financial planning is not just about gathering and reporting data. Rather, it's about interpreting. And the challenge for a good FP&A team is to connect the dots with the available data, explain the business, identify where the next move should be, and how to influence strategic business decisions, not allowing just the board and senior management to rely on gut feeling. A strong FP&A individual or team needs to be integrated with the business and have the ears such as sales, marketing, and supply. They need to be the right-hand person of the CFO and be comfortable in sharing their thoughts with the CEO. Good FP&A functions have people in them that understand the business drivers and know how to use that insightful information to their.
I guess don't want any big surprises, or is this really just another case of deja vu all over?
These inhibitors. The challenge with budgets and forecasts is that at times the input you receive rather will most likely be. So things are tough, but the perception is that the C-suite still expects some strong performance on the budget, or vice versa. If things are going well, there may be a conservative approach to ensure that the budget is met. This is why it's important that the FP&A have a strong relationship with the business so that business feels comfortable having honest and transparent conversations. In addition, it allows the FP&A individual and set their own expectations on the budget and forecast and be able to probe and challenge the underlying assumptions.
That's great. And Tom, what about you? What have been the main obstacles that you've run into, and kind of what unique perspective do you have from an investor relations standpoint in particular?
Yeah, I would say, very similar to Henry, but I would also add that the main issues that I've seen are really around forecasts, either being too aggressive or too conservative, rather than a more balanced 50-50 forecast. We take is that we want our businesses to provide their best 50-50 view. Our organization is rather complex and we're constantly seeing the same sites either overperform on what we refer to them as the sandbaggers or underperform, the optimists, if you will. Also, going public in 2014 only made matters worse as the sandbaggers started sandbagging more aggressively, and the optimists became even more optimistic as they thought that they were helping us develop guidance. So change one to be more than one that, to be truthful, we're still working through today internally. We've coached the teams to stop trying to manage the street expectation, We just need to understand a balanced forecast from the teams and an assessment of the risks and opportunities within each business unit that exists at a consolidated level.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Tom. Thanks, Henry. On the next from last year, it shows some of the reasons respondents felt that their FP&A functions were not operating at a more strategic level. Interestingly enough, it appears as if most respondents indicated that they were simply manipulating data rather than that. Some respondents also raised the specter of the dreaded silos coming into play here. Do either of you have any comments on your efforts to help transform the FP&A function into a more strategic role within the organization?
So I'll go first. I'm not surprised to see any of these inhibitors on the list, to be honest. I think I've come across them all at some point in my career. What I've done is attempted to get my team off the Excel spreadsheet and force them to be more building the right relationships with their business partners. Understanding the needs of their customers will ensure that they provide the analysis necessary to help with the decision-making support aspect of the role, part of what the FP&A group is supposed to do. You know, what if you can't really use it efficiently? If those in FP&A role out of the rooms
that always allows you to have more and more data and reporting and gathering data and have no time for analysis. The key for me is to understand the business, what's the strategic objectives, and what are the key business drivers. That's the foundation from where you start from, and then what data is important and what analysis is important to ensure that the business is headed in the right direction.
Great. Thanks a lot. We're going to move on to budgeting a little bit here on the next slide. As you can see here on this slide, only 17% of the companies surveyed by the APQC believe that the budgeting process is very valuable, mainly because the budget is used only as a guide and not as an absolute baseline measure. Another 37% of the respondents suggested that the budget process is valuable, but even these respondents indicated that the process needs improvement. The remaining respondents felt that the budgeting process was either, 1, somewhat valuable, but the budget quickly became obsolete, 2, was only valuable for a small number of people, generally the senior management or the board, or 3, and probably more concerning, that the budgeting process was not valuable at all. Interestingly enough, another smart guy, Jack G., once said the budgeting process sucks the energy, time, and fun and big dreams out of an organization. Tom, what are your thoughts on these?
So Mario, again, I'm not really overly surprised by these results. You know, from my perspective and from the perspective of Catalan, I don't think anyone thinks the process is perfect, but the organization doesn't view the process as a waste of time either. It's sort of somewhere in the middle. Every year we conduct a lessons learned meeting after the budget process to gather feedback across the organization on what's worked and what hasn't worked. We then incorporate those findings into the next year's process in the spirit of continuous improvement. If the budgeting process is going to be perceived as valuable by the entire chief suite, it must include more than just the P&L. The P&L is a good starting point, of course, but the true value really comes from combining your basic P&L data with other company data. Non-financial data is often critical and may actually present some other critical key performance indicators or KPIs for those outside the finance team. It's very likely that other systems make it relevant to the budgeting or forecasting process, such as sales data from a CRM system. Using this other data is likely to result in more accurate forecasts and will most certainly improve collaboration among the management teams and break down some of these silos that we talked about earlier. Another thing that can be done to help with the value of the budget process is using it to set management incentive plan targets. This way the teams all have a stake in the ground and are accountable for the budget figures that they help develop. Tying your budget or financial commitment certainly, in my view, has helped organizations buy-in and engagement.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Henry?
Yeah, I don't think anyone ever gets excited about budget season or putting together a financial plan. However, in our company, everyone understands the importance of the budget as it provides a framework and measurement tool for each of the business units to run their operations. I think the other important point I'll add is it's to ensure compliance and buy-in. It's important that the tone be set by the C-suite and that the budget is aligned with the strategic objectives of the company in order to make an effective budgeting and financial plan process.
Great. Thanks a lot, Henry. All right, so on this slide here, I guess we have an example of what would be considered poor strategic budgeting. And I guess the object here is to avoid this in your companies.
Okay, and that will take us to our first polling question. In your opinion, how well aligned is the current FP&A model with the pace and needs of the company's unfolding business strategy?
Excellent. So it seems here that the bulk of the respondents said that the process is well aligned but needs periodic review, or that it's adequately aligned. We'll go on to the next slide, which will also show the results of another APQ survey, which 25% of the companies surveyed by the APQC believe that their FP&A function is either well aligned or very well aligned with the pace and needs of the respective company's unfolding business strategy. Tom, Henry, any surprises in what you see here from either the APQ survey or the audience? And how well aligned do you think your own FP&A functions are with your organizations? Tom?
So I would say no real surprises here from my perspective. APQC survey shows your typical bell curve. I would say my organization would see things similarly, but probably be more aligned with the viewers and where they came out. Real improvements organization, and we probably see a higher percentage of participants on the left side curve, and I think that's where our audience really landed. To me, that's been a factor of really tone from the top. Our FP&A function had the support of the CEO and the management team buy into the value that we add to the organization, and because of that, we're involved in all the right discussions within the company as we're all managing towards the common goal.
Some organizations are better at it than others, but I think it's both result focused, ongoing, and that's what we do at our company. We've made some great improvements over the last few years, but it's something that we focus on every day. Are also successful, but then at the end of the day, the FP&A team needs to demonstrate its value.
That's great, and it seems to me, as you guys both pointed out too, the shift from our audience, and given the fact that over the past couple of years, it seems that CFOs and their financial management may have also been a result in the shift to the left, as more organizations are spending more time ensuring that their FP&A functions are aligned with the business. All right, so let's move on. On slide 11 here, we see some barriers to improving the FP&A's value. Historic good solutions to the FP&A dilemma, from my perspective. One, you have Excel, which is error-prone, or you have big ERP systems, but they're not really built for this area in many cases. As a result, from my experience, both as a former CFO and now as a consultant, I've seen that organizations either end up choosing not, or recently they've been looking into some new cloud-based tools that are A, more flexible, B, cheaper than the bigger ERP solutions we discussed earlier, and C, easier to use and can often be maintained by the finance department with little or no support from the IT department. I also think it's important to point out that process is not a key facilitator to the company's success, or so it is perceived. The FP&A process is often very time-consuming. It can become irrelevant far too quickly. As a matter of fact, more than 70% of the companies say that their budget is outdated by the first quarter. And there's not enough insight to provide timely adjustments or to be able to react quickly. Finally, I think FP&A is considered to have a high cost with questionable benefits. 47% of budget managers would rather wrestle a grizzly while that bear is why people call in sick is the budget season, which rank right above my finger stuck in a bowling ball. So Henry, Tom, what have been some of the more vexing issues you have had to face while trying to improve your FP&A processes, and what did you guys do to overcome those issues? Tom, you want to go first?
Sure. When I was building out the FP&A function at Catalent, we're faced with some of the same issues that I'm sure everyone on this call have encountered at some point. Limited budget, manual Excel-led processes, and overly time-consuming those by implementing Hyperion Financial Management, or as we refer to it, HFM, which was already used in the organization, but not for the forecast and budget process. This eliminated the manualness, if you will, of the process and really helped improve overall forecast accuracy because the teams could focus the time on the right parts of the process as opposed to just compiling it in the first place. As for the time commitment side of the budget process, we've cut it down to an 8-week process, which may still seem like a long time, but much shorter than the 12-week process that we had in place in past years. In my experience, the budget process is going to take as long as you and if you allocate 12 weeks to the teams, they'll be working on it for 12 weeks. So we found that cutting down to an 8-week process actually felt better to the organization, didn't amount to any later nights or more hours, and rather just forced the teams to be more efficient with the process. We've also branded the FP&A group as a feeder organization from a talent perspective into other finance and operational leadership roles in the organization. This has really helped us attract talent, strengthen the bench in the organization. Able within Catalent, and every operational leader we now has some sort of FP&A business partner that ensures that they have all the funding at their fingertips to make sure they're making the right decisions for the business.
That's excellent. Thanks a lot, Tom. Henry, what about you?
Yeah, one of our biggest challenges is that it's a time-consuming process, not just for FP&A, but for the business. We've made gains making it more efficient and less taxing on the business. We've even gone through a few iterations of technology with it. We've improved processes, and we've tried to remove a lot of the non-value-added analysis or steps in the process. The key is to try to make it possible to the business. It still takes more time than I would like, and we continuously challenge ourselves to improve. It is definitely a challenge.
Great. Thanks, guys. I think that takes us up to polling question number 2.
Which of the following budgeting and forecasting techniques are used by your company?
Seems here that most respondents have indicated that they use a last year plus a percentage, which if we move on to the next slide, I think you'll see here that the bulk of respondents to the APQC survey said the same thing. And I must admit, as a former CFO, the bulk of my budget was done in a similar fashion. With the exception of possibly considering new customers and or new markets, many of my assumptions were based on what happened in the prior year, or at least what was happening up until my budget season in the current year, and was then adjusted by an agreed upon percentage, or was maintained, if an expense, at the same level as a percentage of revenue as it was projected to be. In certain cases, budgetary line items may have used more than one of the above techniques. So Tom, what kind of budgeting forecasting techniques are typically used at Catalent?
Sure. So I would agree with the survey in general. We're using some of the same techniques. We start every budget process by setting revenue and profitability targets for our business units that are really based on a last year plus methodology. Experience is shown at Catalent part of provide this guidance up front on what our expectations are, that we'll end up with a budget that our board and shareholders would just not view as an acceptable target. So now by setting targets in advance, the BU leadership team need to drive the business towards those targets. We also do sprinkle in some activity-based budget process for those strategic initiatives that we know we plan to undertake in the coming year, and it's really utilize zero-based or predictive modeling in our current process at Catalent.
Great, thank you. And Henry, what about those techniques you guys use at Tiffany?
Yeah, similar to Tom, we provide revenue and earning targets at the outset. We evaluate our current performance, we look at market trends, we have discussions with all our various business units to ensure that we've got alignment from a senior management perspective as well as a board, so that you start the budgeting process off on a good point, on a good start. From there, we take a zero. There's some areas where we may take last year plus or minus, but for the most part, it's the bottoms-up approach. In the budget, and the costs are being scrutinized from year to year.
That's great, and I always like to throw this in as a little color commentary. In the past, I had been in the Army, and the Army has a very unique, but haven't used it by the end of the year. You just use it all up so that you try to get the same budget again for the following year. Definitely not advised for those of us working in management now. So moving on to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about some Optimum forecast process designs here. So here we have a suggested process design for Optimum FP&A performance. Some of the key things to point out here are the following. First, assessing forecast accuracy is an important step in the process. Forecast accuracy is one of those strange things, though. Most people agree that it should be measured, yet many companies don't do it. So guys, what do you think about measuring forecast accuracy, and do you do it in your organization? Henry?
I think it's a very important step, not just to determine if it's good or bad. This would allow you to modify the forecasting process going forward and hopefully reduce the volatility in the future.
Great, but I guess the big question comes up, Henry, will we ever get our forecast 100% right?
Well, forecast accuracy is a highly useful measure, but it has to be used correctly. We cannot and should not expect that every forecast be 100% accurate. We simply don't have crystal balls. However, measuring forecast accuracy and communicating the results drives attention and focus into the process.
Good points. And Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Henry. I'd also add that measuring forecast accuracy could identify cultural problems within the organization, like the sandbagging or optimistic forecasters that I mentioned earlier. In some cases, people may be motivated to alter forecasts in order to avoid bad news or to cover themselves for a rainy day. Measuring forecasting accuracy can help us to identify these issues perhaps in advance and address them before they can become a real problem. So I believe that publishing accuracy numbers lets the business and its leaders know that they really need to pay attention to certain parts of the forecast process, and that's something that we currently do every quarter at Catalent.
That's great. And right after forecast accuracy, we see that it's important to work with the right people in the organization. I know in my case, prior to first arriving in my last CFO role, continued to be getting the right people in the organization involved in the forecasting process. Historically, the forecasting process was simply perceived as just another accounting exercise and was often left to just the finance team. However, I slowly began to organize meetings with most, if not all, of the teams in order to update those forecasts and get them to buy into a thing. Tom, you want to go first on this one?
Sure. I think that's a good point, Mario. The forecast process simply will not succeed if it doesn't involve people outside of finance. In fact, the art, if you will, of forecasting is only the FP&A team gets those with the right information involved with the process so that their specific area or whatever they can bring to the table is actually incorporated into the process. In fact, involving the sales team, imperative in my view, markets, the specific will really provide valuable information about potential demand spikes and troughs, changing customer habits, desires, other key information like that. The matrix organization that we have at Catalent really engages the functional leaders on the cost side and drives more accountability and involvement from those outside of just the finance organization. This was certainly not an easy change to make in the organization when we implemented the matrix and required a culture change, if you will, but it's one that we're now certainly benefiting from, in my view.
Great. Henry, what about you?
Yeah, the FP&A process is definitely a team effort. It can't be us versus them exercise within the organization. It's important to involve people from sales, manufacturing, supply, marketing, even human resources in order to have a truly complete picture of what's happening within the business.
Excellent. And finally, I'd like to point out that the importance of identifying and taking corrective action.
Without a doubt, Mario, I agree. And this gets back to some of the points we made earlier about the FP&A function having the ability to change results and to be strategic, value-added function within the organization. Simply reflecting new numbers is not going to help anyone. Rather, the FP&A function should be the company identify when the ship is potentially going off course and bring the right to identify things that can be fixed. Here's an example. If the head of FP&A walks into a meeting with his or her CFO with data that simply shows that the prior budget or maybe even the most recent forecast is not going to be met, but can't tell the CFO why this is happening or how it might be corrected, that's not going to be a great meeting. But if they're able with a list of recommendations from the leadership team on how to get the ship back on course, now that's a good meeting.
Excellent. That really puts it into perspective, and I couldn't agree more. It's a perfect example of making the FP&A function just numbers into actionable, timely business information. So on the next slide, we'll just see basically a much more detailed verbal description of some of the things we just talked about based on the process flow. Key takeaway points being setting up a logical, standardized cross-functional, measuring forecast accuracy without punishing people for a miss, calling it the cheap suite, to own the process and not make this just an accounting exercise, and eliminating those bad behaviors. Behavioral processes, this political versus social the biggest challenge that I faced as a CFO was breaking down some of those traditional political processes that have become the norm cases and are primarily interested in fighting for their own departmental budgets, regardless of what was going on with the business. It reminded me of the time in the Army when it seemed, par for the course was we would wax the floor 5 times because we had a ton of wax left over, or we'd suddenly have a live fire exercise to burn off all the ammunition we had because it took less ammo than we thought to get everyone qualified, and therefore we wanted to go conduct an extra field training exercise so we'd get the money again for the next year. The idea that it was necessary the entire process same year. The thought process was just not there to reevaluate our needs from the ground up and to consider other areas where we simply may not have had enough money in the current year. What have you guys seen in regards to some of these processes in your experience? Tom?
So I would say in an organization, every individual is expected to perform certain roles, right? And what his or her superiors really expect. Thus, in many cases, individuals are motivated or maybe limited in superiors' expectations. After all, at the end of the year, we want to do a good job for our supervisors, as they're the ones that are going to have the most impact on our compensation, whether that's bonus, career path within the organization. However, sometimes individuals perform certain tasks or exhibit certain behavior. There are large numbers of instances in organizations when employees assist their fellow employees, even though this assistance may not be part of their specified job duties. And in many cases, this assistance is spontaneous, and it doesn't result necessarily in any type of formal reward. But what's get this type of partnering or social behavior, as you mentioned, to become part of the culture of the organization? Individuals' behavior that is discretionary, not directly by the, and in the aggregate promotes the efficient and effective function, really be what's recognized as the right behavior, and not the silo or mentality that exists in many company cultures.
Great. That sounds great. But is that something that must be encouraged from the tone, from the top, right? I mean, even here at Tone Resnick, we have approached our CEO and the executive board, as well as our various OMPs and RMPs. The idea is to take line of service to bring other opportunities to the firm and to your fellow partners. How do you see this being applied to the FP&A function at Catalent in particular?
So I would say that the role of the FP&A team here is to really diplomatically guide those operating managers and the rest of the management team as well to really the root, and then to address those issues for the betterment of the entire organization. Here it's not about us versus them or my budget versus your budget.
Right. Henry?
Yeah, I agree. The FP&A function must meet with all the teams, departments in the organization, especially those that have a significant impact on moving the needle when it comes to the company's overall performance. Those regular meetings with sales, procurement, manufacturing, distribution, marketing, etc. teams are crucial. And let's not forget that getting some of those groups into a room be going far better than we originally planned is going to be necessary to keep the company on track. To paraphrase the adage, we either live together or we die alone. I would say we either live or die together, with together being the key point here.
Thanks a lot, Henry. Some healthy forecasting behaviors, and I think these are some of the ones that we can all agree are good for a company to have foster. Recognizing and rewarding good social and back those facts up with real wishful thinking. It's also important to communicate across the organization, and it is important to trust and respect must be gained by demonstrating a commitment to the team. And especially with respect to forecasting, we need to accept a certain level of uncertainty and variation, and we must be willing to change. As they say, change is inevitable, except from a vending machine. So I think it can be said that having the right process, people, and data and information is key to the success of any FP&A function, but it is definitely true in the case of building an effective FP&A group across an organization. First, you must be able to define the cadence and timing and consistently. It's also important to ensure that the process is aligned with the organization's goals as well as the company's strategy, something that we did touch on earlier in our discussion. Ideally, the evolution of rolling forecasts would be great, although I must admit I hadn't quite achieved that objective at my last company. We'll talk more about rolling forecasts in just a minute. It's also key to monitor and act on variances in plans and reforecasts while assessing the success of both your organization company against goals and objectives of the entire organization. Henry, what do you think?
Yes, this all makes sense. There has to be a defined process that crosses all key functions within the organization. I know we mentioned this earlier as well, but this can't be perceived as an accounting or finance team project only. It is important to get everyone behind this process, and that will be the best way to align with the company's strategy, as well as with the specific department and executing the strategy.
Excellent. Of course, having the right people can never be underestimated. Tom, what do you think about when you consider the skills of your FP&A team?
So I would say that as we talked about a few moments ago, the FP&A team's got to be diplomatic. After all, they'll be working across functions, need to be able to deliver some pretty strong, being able to deal with some pretty strong personalities, and just be able to work together with others. They also need to have skills. That's a big part of the job. A great team is sophisticated enough to present a range of possible outcomes to senior management.
So is that storytelling of yours of a fictional nature, Tom?
No, not at all. The range of by good data abilities are true stories, if you will.
Gotcha. Henry, anything to add to that?
I think Tom has it right so far. I would add that good FP&A analysts also seem to have an insatiable desire to solve business puzzles. While I think this aligns with Tom's comment about diplomacy, they have to have a bit of customer service attitude in their delivery. Also have a strong mastery of analytical tools and be able to manage large quantities of data.
Great. Which leads us to the data itself. Having the right key performance indicators and not getting lost in the forest for the trees with simply too much data is extremely important. Also, if possible, you should use dash, as they say, a picture or deep data from the dashboards. So about dashboards, do you guys typically use them in your companies? Henry?
We use dashboards dashboards. They're important business performance. We have them around customer service. While I like them and they are important, I'm also behind the dashboard. So what starts as a dashboard becomes a report with lots of data or the creation of several more dashboards. So while dashboards can be a good management tool, they have to ensure they are meeting its intended purpose. Also, as the business evolves or strategic objectives change, you need to ensure that the key metrics are being measured and reported.
Great. Tom, anything to add?
I would just say we also use dashboards within the company to measure performance, whether on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis, depending on the metrics. I won't get into any more detail on that, but I'll say that Henry does raise us to dashboards, which I would certainly second.
Great. So some of the benefits of dashboards is they're easy to read nature, and the fact that it may be possible to present several graphs at the same time in order to provide a picture as to how the organization is going. In the past, it was often difficult to create dashboards and custom reporting using others when users were left with a choice between a large, expensive ERP system or Excel spreadsheets. Again, I think it's important to point out that there's a host of budgeting and planning SaaS tools that are available now, some of which we work with regularly here at CohnReznick in helping our clients improve their FP&A capabilities, which leads us to the third polling question.
What technology is being used for FP&A and internal reporting?
All right, great. Looks like it's a combination of spreadsheets spreadsheets only, or a combination of spreadsheets and dedicated software. It seems like there's very few respondents who said they actually have software dedicated to this process. With that being said, we'll go to our technology philosopher. I think while we wait for while we've seen the answers here, I think it's important. It's too complex. Your team won't use it. So, well, I'm not sure how ancient that may be, but I think the point's still relevant. Tom, what do you think?
I mean, the tools have to be easy to use, particularly if you're looking for others in the testing tools in the world won't amount to much if people are expected to be using them, can't really work with them easily. Before you know it, you'll be back to having a bunch of Excel workarounds, which will really defeat the purpose of having such tools in the first place.
Great. Thanks a lot. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about leveraging data. So in addition to the types of tools used to accumulate and report that's important to the organization, it is also important to see how companies are leveraging that data. So on this slide, we see the results of another survey conducted and how data is used in decision-making across organizations. As you can see, the bulk of respondents are either simply doing an analysis or they are doing a basic what you guys do with your data, and is it a combination of these types of analysis that are described on this slide? Henry, you want to go first?
Yeah, we do all the things listed on the slide in one form or another. It could be simple variance analysis versus plan of prior year. It could be correlating various data points such as store traffic, conversion, underlying store performance, ROIs on investments, or comparing performance of various stores and regions. And our important part is that you've got to be able to use the data to provide business insight.
Great. Tom?
Yeah, I would agree. These are the types of, these are all as we analyzing things within the organization. And I also agree with sort of the order of important. Recently, we've really made some great strides with the help of technology regarding the aggregation. More time on the value add, which is really being able to analyze the data, learn from it in a way that can really benefit the organization.
Great. And with all that work, the question remains, how effective is the analysis in the end? Tom, what do you think about the effectiveness of your FP&A groups and the results on this slide?
Really surprised. I would expect the results in my organization to be modestly better than what we see here, given the role that the FP&A organization plays in my organization. As I mentioned, I'm a big supporter of the CEO, CFO that really relies heavily on the analysis and recommendations of the FP&A team. With that being visible to other leaders in the organization, the team's reliance on FP&A is higher than what I've seen in other organizations. This has helped us really attract the right talent into the group. We always say internally that a good FP&A analyst is going to pay for themselves within 6 months of joining the organization, just by identifying, cost opportunities, redundancies, efficiency gains, et cetera, and that analytical support that they provide to the business can really help with that.
Great, thanks a lot, Tom. And on the next slide, we'll talk about some ways to improve forecast accuracy. I think we touched on many of these strategies throughout the course of our discussion so far, but I think it's important to emphasize them nonetheless. So what do you guys think about the types of things companies should do to improve their forecast accuracy? Henry?
Breaking down cultural barriers preventing discussion on unwelcome forecast information cannot be overemphasized. As we previously discussed, companies should prepare standard reports that provide assumptions, if they don't already exist. Publishing or at least reviewing forecast accuracy data can help detect these types of problems. It means of telling the business leaders that they really need to pay attention to their own forecasting processes, and that changes cannot simply be just because type answers. Note, this is not to say that participants in the forecasting process should be punished if the forecasts are wrong. The end result is not to have 100% accurate forecast in a reliable forecast. Forecast or error should almost be expected. If there might suspect that there is some sort of gamemanship going on, manipulate actual outcomes in order to correspond.
That's great. I think it's important to point out that people think in general up in details. Tom, any final thoughts on improving forecast accuracy?
I think that the one danger in forecasting is that the process becomes too detailed. Management should really consider deviation filters to focus the forecast efforts on the changes that are deemed to be extraordinary or on an exceptional level. If trends are within certain tolerances or limits, then no further inquiries. However, if there are trends that are arrangement by expectation, should really keep a business-focused, efficient review of the revised forecast.
All great stuff, guys. Thanks. And I think that leads us into our next polling question and a topic that was briefly mentioned earlier, specifically revolving rolling.
Your organization currently develops
Excellent. Actually, pretty good mix here. I'm surprised. Actually, pretty high number using rolling forecasts. So what do you guys think about these results? Do your organizations use rolling forecast techniques, and do they better align your FP&A function with the company? If you use them, how far out do you take rolling forecasts? Henry, you want to start this one?
Sure. So our forecast process is aligned with the business strategies, but our forecasts are limited within the current fiscal year. While we do look out past the fiscal year, we do not have 12 or 18 months rolling forecasts. And two factors, two of which are the company's maturity and ability to deliver within the budget and forecast on a regular set of longer term
points. And Tom, what about you?
Yeah, this is interesting. The use of rolling forecasts is something that I can certainly see my organization benefiting from. I imagine something we may implement in the future, but we're actually not currently using rolling forecasts. Certainly something that we can benefit from, and we'll just need to decide whether it's a 12 or an 18-month approach that we would take.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tom. So let's talk about business transformation here. This is always a challenge, right, when it comes to resources and how we deal with transformation. We never seem to have enough people, time, or money. And that's why is to make the process self-sustaining by focusing on automation and making it as easy as possible to get the forecast data into a readily usable format. Familiar with the concept of organizational resistance. At first, many will be unlikely to embrace the kind of presentation. However, to overcome the non-believers, it's important to over-communicate with the various stakeholders and the IT team. In fact, if the FP&A function has to do a little extra hand-holding at the beginning, I think up front, getting the other functions to in the process.
Mario, I think organizational resistance is reality. Experienced that with Catalent when I first joined. The company was spinning off from Cardinal Health within a $50 billion. We then spun off an equity with IPO in the near future, likely exit. Talk about a rude awakening we're taking with regards to forecasting difficult decisions and find the right people who are willing to join us on this journey towards business partnership between our operational leaders and the finance organization. We did this by joining forces with IT to really gain efficiency, then later implement the matrix organization that I mentioned earlier. And that helped drive financial accountability, the need for more detailed financial analysis and decision-making support. And now we're a better organization as a result, and I think the people here really feel it.
Great, thanks, Tom. Henry?
Yeah, I agree. FP&A has to continually evolve and stay current with the underlying business changes and ensure that it's adding value to the business. And while some changes may require dollars or resources, such as a new planning changes, which may not require dollars, but rather just thinking about things differently or a different approach.
Great, thanks, guys. So on this next slide, we'll see that CFOs want there to do those time and becoming a true business leader within the organization. And on the next slide for this FP&A transformation we've been talking about, this phase is to streamline the planning in our processes with our people and in the use of our data. With respect to the process, we must first radically reduce the amount of time spent in the planning cycle and ensure that our data is being accumulated faster without losing any accuracy. With respect to people, it's important to get more people involved by making it easier to participate in the FP&A process into one place. Next, the process should begin to utilize rolling forecasts, which some of you are already doing in our audience, and those should theoretically allow for easier course corrections over a long time span. A best-in-class FP&A function will also increase business engagement and allow more people in the organization to actually feel like they have an impact on or ownership of the financial results of the organization. Best-in-class FP&A function will begin to use rich dashboards in order to more readily present a picture of how the organization is performing. And finally, as the FP&A function matures into the realms of true strategic finance, we see the process making full utilization of operational KPIs to drive business decisions, horizons towards which the business can be focused. At this point, data throughout the organization, including CRM, billing, or other relevant databases, should also be fully integrated into the FP&A process. Once this has all happened, we can truly transform into a corporate performance management function, which brings us up to our fifth and final polling question.
What, if any, are your finance team's plans for cloud technology?
So while we wait for our participants to take a few minutes to answer that question, Henry, Tom, how are your organizations currently use or not using it, what are your plans, if any, to use it in the future? Tom, you want to go first?
Yeah, we use technology to some extent within the company, and it is helpful with regards to version control, the ability to access data and analysis from different parts of the globe, which is really important for a company that has more than half of its employees outside the U.S. like we do. However, this is certainly an area where we can improve, and our IT team is certainly focused on it, and I expect to see our reliance on cloud-based technology increase in the future.
Henry, what about you guys?
Yeah, we don't necessarily use cloud technology within the FP&A space, but it is an area that I migrate to. So I think if you're not using it, I think everyone's going to be using it in the future.
Gotcha. That's great. Thanks a lot, guys. And we see the results here too, right? Either no plans. I guess the bulk of our respondents have said either no plans in the near future, or they're using it and they're likely to increase the use of cloud technology, which I think dovetails with what you just said, Henry. So thank you all for the participation. I think before we move on to our Q&A period, I want to end on one final thought. A good forecaster is not smarter than everyone else. He merely has his ignorance better organized. Well, I think actually based on the amount of time, we probably don't have enough time to respond to questions now. So I think what we'll do is, for those of you who have submitted questions, we will get back to you after through email, and we will contact you with responses.
We'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar. As was mentioned earlier, an email including CPE certificate will be sent to all participants who answered the required number of polling questions a few days after the presentation. We will be sending a copy of the presentation along with some additional information to all attendees after the event. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.